My name is Catherine McAndrew. I work for the Land Workers Alliance on issues related to agricultural working conditions, both in the UK and internationally. And the aim of this session is to try and bring together specifically seasonal workers in the agroecological sector to discuss issues of their working conditions and discussing how to organize and build power for these workers within the sector. The way that this session is going to be structured is going to be a short introduction of myself that I'm doing right now, and then we'll hear from Zoe Miles, who's been doing a lot of work to bring together seasonal workers in the UK and discuss how we can go about organising ourselves and advocating for ourselves within our enterprises. After that, the main priority of this session is to be a space for discussion, primarily, and that discussion to be primarily led by seasonal workers themselves. So I would emphasize that if you're a manager or an owner of an enterprise, that to maybe take a step back, to listen to these conversations more than more than initiate them, and let seasonal workers themselves take the lead on in this discussion. I in terms of just sort of my own perspective on this, the purpose of agroecology and food sovereignty is primarily, it's not just about, in my mind, it's not just about agroecological methods. It's not about just about the way the specific methods of farming. It is about creating a food system in which food producers can produce food autonomously. They can produce food in a manner that is under their own control, and lead to the creation of a food system which is owned and controlled and run by the producers and consumers of food for their own interests and not for the interests of market imperatives or corporate domination. Within this framework, I think it is therefore necessary to include workers as food producers, and especially considering in the UK, the vast majority of food producers are going to be wage workers, especially given how completely divorced from the land that we are in this country. And therefore, I think it's imperative that an organisation that is campaigning and seeking to build food sovereignty, like the Land Workers Alliance, gives its full support and backing to workers who are seeking to organise. So on that note, I think I'll pass over to Zoe to give an introduction to the work that she has been doing, bringing together seasonal workers in the UK. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Yeah, that was a great introduction. And also, I feel like what you didn't cover was all of your experience in unionising as a whole. And I think that would be really great to bring in at some point, because like the wealth of experience you're bringing there is just like incredible. This is a participatory session because it's not really about us telling anyone what to do. I can tell you what's been done so far and what we're building on in this session, but I would ask that if you're comfortable and if it's possible for you to turn on your video and your microphones. You can mute yourself if that makes yourself feel better, but if this was in real life, I would still be able to hear you breathe. So that would be great. There will be breakout rooms, like we said, and the point of that is because this session is the third workshop that we've run so far to actually get this conversation off the ground and see where we can go next. So I'm really hoping that everyone who's involved today is able to participate in that way and is hoping to build something as well, because it's not really a talk as much as part of this building. I think I said that clearly. Basically, who am I? I'm Zoe. I've been a seasonal grower this last year, and before that I've been a part-time freelance grower in London. This year I was working full-time in Kent in a live-in horticulture farm. It was organic, it was great, but it had its difficulties like all jobs do. And before that I was working in London for various different organizations, including co-ops, charities, and also community gardens. I've worked with a lot of types of organizations that do land work or education work around land work. So yeah, I guess I've always been in the waged position, other than when I was a co-op member, when I was kind of in that in-between position of like, you're a director, but you're also not a sole director. So anyways, in all of the workplaces that I've worked in the grower or land worky kind of world, I've just experienced that there's like quite a high degree of, I've experienced a degree of isolation that comes with it, that comes with a lot of freelance work anyways. But the isolation was also backed with the fact that I went from jobs that had access to unions, quite obviously, such as even within this like the climbing industry, like, and as a receptionist before, I had access to unions that could support my employment rights, mine and my colleagues' desire to achieve London living wage, to like just like get the sick pay that we were legally entitled to. And I was able to unionize with colleagues, not formally at first, and actually we achieved all of our major wins without being formally unionized. But I really believe that a union, it really isn't about being under someone's branch or paying your subscription, or like being even legally qualified as a union. It's actually just about gaining a network with your colleagues, finding the common ground, and then like moving forward on actions you can agree on and like working towards your common good. And that's what I really think is so difficult in our world of growing and like land work in general. Like, where are our places to network? They're the same as our managers' places to network. You know, I found the Landworkers Alliance incredibly amazing as a networking space, and I'm really involved in it. But I've never felt that I can really represent my own needs as an employee there, because my boss is in the exact same union as me. So that's what the basis of why I felt like I needed something more. And I can't say that I represent anyone at the moment, because all of us are loosely connected and trying to figure out what the common ground is. We haven't got a set organization, but so far there's been 2 main workshops that have gone on. One at the regional LWA gathering in Southeast England, led by Harry, who led a really excellent workshop. I'm just going to read the 3 main the 2 of the main questions that they raised there, that came out from the workshop as well. It wasn't just that it was led by Harry and like put on people, but what people really started to want to answer was, what would we need from a more formalized union? And also people wanted to know more about the history of unions in this sector and what already exists to support people. So that was interesting, but I don't think there was many answers for that. The questions of what like is the line between being, like for volunteer work and not volunteer work in this thinking is quite complex, because as many of you probably have experienced, it's not always straightforward who does what within organizations in land work. There's a need for transparency around wages, access to financial information for individual farmers and farms that are in managerial positions, because a lot of them need more support to pay us better. And basically, I think that it was obvious from that workshop that there's a lot more research needed and maybe support to do that research. Another workshop was run recently with Community Food Growers Network, CFGN, and the LWA at Organically, which is a workers' co-op in North London. Again, I think that Harry was a leader on this, as was Hannah from CFGN and LWA. I wasn't there because of the pandemic, so I have to just summarize. But yeah, there was a lot that came out of it, and a lot of energy towards thinking of ways to take action collectively that weren't just strikes, which is a really important thing to think about, even if we're not quite there yet. It was really great that that came out of this. I mean, as an example, if you've never looked it up, look up what people in Disneyland did to strike. It's really good. But yeah, and I know that's not really necessarily directly relevant, but there is a lot of creative stuff that we can do. So I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, especially when we all often are so deeply connected to the place that we're working, and often the managers we're working for. It's not like I don't want to ruin my boss's life by taking action to improve my own employment. But I mean, that's just my experience. So I think it's interesting that that came up for a lot of people, that they want to be creative with it and not just have strikes, not just stop work altogether, but do want to improve things for themselves and their colleagues throughout the country. Yeah, there's a lot of talk in this about representing these needs to the LWA or to another union or both. And that's something we can talk about as well. And also some people were interested in collecting experiences of trainees in a more thorough research project. And I think that it would be interesting to look at needs there, and also to connect with work that is already being done to network traineeships throughout the country by parts of the LWA. So that's as much of an introduction as I'm going to give. And if anyone wants to ask any questions at this point, I think we've got quite a few people that joined after. And so I'm just going to say again, this is a participatory session. So if you could please unmute it for most of the session. I don't mind if you have a dog or whatever, and also turn on your video. That would be great, because it's not really a talk so much as we're trying to build what this could look like in the future, and that involves conversation, and it would be easier in person, but it would definitely be nice to hear and see people as much as they can get involved with that. So yeah, I think now is our time for questions.
That's great. That's great, Zoe. Thank you so much. It's really, really great to hear about the work and the discussions that have already been being had in this, on this project, really, and also what's being highlighted in terms of the future work that's needed to sort of facilitate workers' organisation in this sector. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions at this point, just raise your hand, and then we can ask them and discuss them.
I have a question. So I don't, Zoe mentioned that you have a lot of experience of unionising, and I'm curious, because Zoe, you said that you're not, the work that you're doing at the moment isn't a formal or legal union. And I wonder, what is the benefit of having a formalized union over sort of just an informal association of people acting in solidarity?
I could answer that, or give a couple of comments. Well, for one thing, there's if you have a legally recognized union, then your employer has to negotiate with you and has to negotiate with your representatives. This means that when it comes to sort of changes to your contract or your pay structure, your employer has to notify you. It has to be negotiated, and some of those changes can be stopped if they are negative or improved or whatever. So that's one clear benefit. The other clear benefit as well is by having an organisation behind you, you have resources that you can draw upon if you need to go on strike, or if you need to take your employer to an employment tribunal or something like that. You have additionally as well, when you're part of a more sort of formalized union structure, you will have regular contacts with other workers in your sector. which you wouldn't get just from being an informal association just in one area. So to give a bit of a counter example of something I'm involved with at the moment in Sheffield. So lots of couriers who deliver takeaways for Just Eat have been taking informalized strike action. Many of these workers are not part of the union that's supporting them, the IWGB, and that has some drawbacks and some benefits. One of the benefits is, the benefit for the position that these workers are in is because they aren't formalized employees. They are, this is the gig economy. They are just, they're paid by the job. They aren't so bound by the anti-trade union laws. So with the anti-trade union laws, if you wanted to go on strike, and additionally as well, this would be the case if you're in a union or out of union, you need to have certain ballot percentages in order to take that legal strike action. But if you're a completely informal employee, like these workers are, they can just do it. Additionally, but just realizing I'm contradicting myself there, that this is, if you're a formal employee, you would need a union to go on strike like this. It would be very difficult for you to legally do that. But I don't think, I think people let the anti-trade union laws blind them a little bit to what they can actually do, and actually employers are not as powerful as they seem on this. The issue with that, I think, those couriers are very much able to rely on, they have to rely on themselves more, they have to rely on their own association. The IWGB is not as able to support them as much. It doesn't have as many resources as a union would, and so there's not as much strike pay that they can draw upon, and that kind of thing. So there are advantages to having a formal structure. However, ultimately, especially when you're building a union in a new sector, which hasn't got the same kind of history of organization, ultimately what you need first and foremost is an association of your employees. The union is not the bureaucracy, it's not the organization, it is the association of workers talking with each other. If you don't have that, you can't do anything. And even just thinking as well with an example of food processing workers in Bakavor, who are organised by the GMB in West London. They got their recognition agreement, about 15 years ago or something like that, and they haven't really done anything with it. And it's again because it's like, they won the recognition agreement back then, and then they never had that. They had the union representing them, but they didn't have that kind of association between each other. And if you don't have that, then it's just like, the union can't really do nearly as much as it can as it could. So ultimately, you are the union, we are the union, one of a better descriptor. So I don't know, that wasn't a particularly clear answer, but it's a contradictory process, really. But
yeah, no, that's really clear. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that is what we don't have at the moment. We don't have a clear connection between us as co-workers, and it's so yeah, that's what we're trying to build, and that is why there's a lot of options ahead. We don't have to formally be recognized as a union. We could do one action, and that could be the end of it. We could be like, it doesn't work. But that is the option ahead. We could become just a branch of the LWA alone, and that would be also better than what we have now. But we could also be associated with any union we wanted, or be an independent thing that's just a hashtag or something like that. That's something that, that's happened in parts of Scotland as well, where people haven't in any way become a formal union, but service industry workers who are freelance, essentially self-employed, they've just used the same hashtag, and that's been supported by people behind that hashtag, but not actually a formal union, and it's been so effective in improving rights up there. So it really is up to us. So yeah.
In terms of Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just realized one thing I meant to ask was, you know, the 2 sessions I mentioned earlier, did anyone actually attend either of them? Okay, just checking. Fine, that's good. It's nice to actually be building on more people. I was kind of thinking, what if everyone's already done it? Okay, cool.
I mean, additionally as well, I mean, I might be jumping the gun a bit here, but when it comes to sort of like within the LWA, what we can do, because I think as Zoe has alluded to, it's sometimes it can be a bit of a contradictory situation where it's like, you know, you're in the same organization as your employer, and when there is you know, there is always, you know, even with the best employer in the world, there will always be some, you know, a little bit of friction there, because, you know, you're buying someone else's time at the end of the you know, at the end of the day, and you know how that, you know, how that time is used and how much you get for it. There will always be some frictions there, and so therefore being in the same organization as your employer can often be a bit of a difficult thing to manage. However, there, you know, I would say, I'm trying to remember what the figure is, but I know it's pretty equal in terms of, like, you know, the number of members of the LWA who are employers and number of members of the LWA who are workers. It's definitely not a case that the LWA is you know, at the moment it's I think what needs to happen is the sort of like the employee members of the LWA need more formal structures within the LWA to sort of like, you know, ensure that their concerns and their interests are being represented in policy and being represented in the services that the LWA provides. And that's something that so, I mean, I started working with the LWA in November, and, you know, this has been something that I, you know, from about sort of January onwards, I've been kind of wanting to try and put more front and center, sort of like, you know, you know, integrating sort of concerns and interests and protagonism of wage workers into what the LWA does and how the LWA articulates its sort of goal of food sovereignty. And so I think, you know, at the very, very least, I think this should be the beginnings of an employees group within the LWA, which is able to sort of bring, bring together all of its, you know, its seasonal and employee members, and able to sort of like, you know, give them a space where they are able to sort of, you know, talk amongst each other and make that, and, you know, sort of like achieve that first step. As Zoe was saying, sort of breaking out of that isolation, and, you know, and talking with one another and discussing our interests. Additionally, as well, I think, you know, there are some, you know, there might even be a little bit of an advantage that the LWA has both employee and employer members, in the sense that due to the you know, the issues with the agroecological sector are often very structural, in the sense that small farms and smaller enterprises and organic enterprises are not given anywhere near the same support as they are than that larger, more conventional farms are given by the government. For instance, the thing that comes to mind is that, you know, in order to qualify for the basic payment system, subsidy systems, subsidy payments, you have to be over 5 hectares, and so that immediately disqualifies a huge, you know, any farms that are smaller than that. So in order to, you know, so therefore, I think there's a case of, like, you know, for workers to get a decent deal, we're going to have to sort the problems of the sector as a whole as well, and need an organization that is able to campaign on that, which is what the LWA is doing. Additionally, as well, I think, you know, we could be in a position to sort of like, you know, really sort of, you know, set guidelines in a sense for things like traineeships that have been mentioned, which, you know, and make sure that, you know, we can take in on, you know, on the you know, the you know, the grievances and the issues that workers are able to raise, and ensure that, you know, they're, you know, the LWA is able to put forward, like, you know, this is what we think that traineeship should be like, and these are the standards that they should follow, and therefore, you know, and, you know, because of our position is that we might have more influence over what employers do, then an organization that was completely alien to them. At the same time, of course, even as I'm saying this, I'm very, very, very aware that this is, it's a contradiction that is very, very difficult to manage. And I think I think we must, in order to provide for our for all of our members, we must start doing building structures where that allow employees to talk with one another about their experiences within the other way, and also like their experiences more generally. It's just a rant from me there.
Okay, there's going to be more chances to ask questions later, but they're also at no point can feel free to just post any questions in the chat or just raise them as they come to you. We're going to do some breakout rooms. It's actually hard to tell who's here because I know people, it's fair enough, you're at home and on Zoom you have to do things. But yeah, it's hard to tell because of some cameras being off if you're able to participate in the breakout rooms. So it would be great to know, don't you think? If
I've been keeping count, and I think we've got 10 people here who aren't RFC volunteers. Okay. So should we have 2 breakout rooms?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I set it up, so if you want, I can start them. But maybe you want to introduce the question, right?
Okay, sure. So the first, in order to facilitate as much discussion between people as possible, we're going to have a series of breakout rooms on 3 questions. The first of which being what are our common issues and grievances as workers in agroecological enterprises. And so that we'll have about 10 to 15 minute discussion on that before coming back and then moving on to the next question, which will be on how do we build power for seasonal workers. And then the third and final breakout room will be what could we achieve in the future and what could our next steps be. So in your breakout rooms, if someone could nominate themselves as a note taker, and then once the breakout room is concluded, we'll send a message round saying how long we've got when we're about to come back to the room again. You could post that in the chat. That would be great, and then that means we can keep these notes together for future reference.
Yeah,
okay.
But we also, I think that since it's such small groups, if you want to do brief introductions, that might be nice.
Yeah.
Since we're in such a small room anyways.
Okay, cool. All right, shall we get started then?
Okay, I'll send you into the rooms then.
Okay, great. Hello again. That felt quicker than I expected it to do. I was just wondering, did anyone in the other breakout room take notes on what you discussed?
Yeah, Peter,
I have. Excellent. I have some written notes on a piece of paper, which actually is not as useful as that, but I will write those in the chat. But if you want to post those there, that'd be great. But I'll just to give a feedback of what we discussed. How often there's a very large reliance on volunteer labour in this sector, which often makes it quite difficult to feel like we can assert our ask for better conditions, in a sense, if there's a large pool of people who are willing to do this work and take their place in a sense for free, and additionally as well, the dependence on grant funding was raised, which I think is another. I personally think this is a bit of inevitability in the section. I think it's the case even in the conventional farms that they're dependent on government grants, which we do not have access to. But I think it is difficult, because then it's like, if farms do not know that they've got that income for the next year, if they're applying for grants on year, it's going to make it very very unwilling to sort of provide for decent conditions. And as well, like it was mentioned that on one farm that wages were about £6 an hour or something like that, and when some workers were not able to stay on the farm, they had because they weren't able to support their families. And if we are to create a sustainable agricultural system that is able to provide for people, and is also able to value food producers just as as essential workers, just like many others are, people have to be able to provide for themselves and their families. And that's if we aren't able to do that, then this is going to be a problem in the system for many years. There's also that's just a quick summary of what we discussed. I think it would be good if we move to the next sort of like discussion, which will be on this next one will be how can we build power for ourselves as workers in the agroecological sector. So how do we organize? What structures can we use? What opportunities do we have to advocate for our rights and for decent conditions? So yeah, I think if we launch the next breakout room, and was that enough time, do you think?
I think we covered quite a lot, Peter.
Yeah, I think
taking notes, and yeah, we'll compile those afterwards, so that we had overlapping things. We talked about other things such as sick pay, annual leave, and the insecurity attached to contracts and self-employed contracts.
Right.
But yeah, it seemed like enough time.
Okay, that's good. Okay, let's get on to the next group, the next breakout room then. Awesome. There's kind of one last subject that we kind of wanted to cover, which was on sort of essentially next steps and where do we want to go from here. So I think how do we want to do this? Should we go straight into the next room, do you think, Zoe?
We could, or I was thinking, because it's not that big, we could just do this group all together.
Yeah, let's do that.
And then, yeah, because I feel like this is the most important one to really share. And the other ones, like I said, I'm happy to write them all up into one document and share them around. And I'll bring them to whatever happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, awesome.
Cool. So I have a suggestion of what could happen next. I'll just say it since we're all in this room together. The people who have organized some of this together have suggested that we all have a meeting towards the end of January on Zoom, because it's the easiest way to predictably do this with people around the country. It's only an hour, just so that we have a date in the diary. Sorry, I'm just reminding myself and finding it. On Wednesday, the 26th of January from 6 till 7 p.m. And it would be great if anyone who's here could either express interest and say that they can't come, but say that they'd like to stay on a mailing list, or to come. And we'll have written up, then we'll bring together the notes from the 2 other sessions, from the session that's happening at the same time as this, that also is in connection to unionizing, and that's the Roots into Food Growing report panel discussion. And out of that report, which is a report on accessing food growing for Black and people of color, one of the key recommendations out of that report was to improve employment rights for people in this world, and also for trainees, and like create paid opportunities, all these things. And that really directly linked into unionizing, and that's what the group decided to bring in. So in part of their panel discussion there, Harry, who led other workshops related to this, is in that, bringing that up. So they'll be invited to the same workshop, and all of you are invited. And I would like to form some kind of mailing list to actually formally invite you. And you can share this to anyone that you feel should be included. So if you're happy to share your contact details with me in the chat, that would be great. I will take them down, but it does mean other people can see them. So you have to be aware of that. You could always private message me if you'd prefer. Thanks. Yeah, so that's my suggestion of a next step, but that isn't saying what we should do in it. It's just when we could meet again.
Yeah, I think it'd be really good to have like have a contact list for everyone. I think that's really essential. If I might just, in terms of a very immediate short-term objective of what we can do within the LWA, I think at the very least we should set up an employee working group, which is about, and the aim of this employee working group is to create a forum which employee members of the LWA can talk with one another about their conditions, that this be autonomous from other structures within the LWA, so not one where employers are able to hear what we're talking about, and to discuss the sort of ways that we can improve conditions and create sustainable livelihoods for people working as wage workers in agriculture. And this can go from, the aim of this working group can go from sort of like, pushing for policy work, pushing for, setting up projects, like I think it was mentioned, like a research project on traineeships. We could potentially sort of like, use the group to set up that. And then also like, to explore ways of maybe like, even looking at, as has been suggested, partnerships with other unions to, create those sort of more formalized structures if that's something we want to do. Because I think what's really what struck me from these conversations is how isolated people are on their enterprises at the moment. These enterprises are all very, very small. They don't have that many employees, and they don't, it's very difficult for people to talk with one another. Also, I think it'd be really interesting to know a little bit more about, I think Hess mentioned a traineeship network. I was just wondering whether you could talk a little bit about that, like what but yeah, I think that's the least we can do. I think in the other way, I think that's the first step that we can do as an organization to support this.
Does anyone else have things that they'd like to bring in? I know, like, in all the breakout rooms I've been in, or both, they were so active. So it'd be great to hear again from you. Sorry, Hesty, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Did you hear any of what I said?
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so there was a traineeship network set up this year by the Land Workers Alliance, which several farms were enrolled in. So it meant that trainees met each other going on various visits to other farms, which was a good way to connect with people, know what, and find out about other people's sort of conditions and like what they were getting out of their trainee exchange. So that will be an ongoing project next year with a new group of trainees. So it felt like a good starting point for people that are just coming into horticulture, who are sort of at the bottom rung, often on unpaid traineeships or whatever it may be. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say on that, but it's a good starting point for sort of building networks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. That's a really good point. And actually, Sharon brought up a similar, maybe the same thing, in our not in the same way, but also brought that up as a really helpful. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Sharon.
kind of what just like Hester said. Hester was the one galvanizing everyone about like unions, and that was amazing. And I just jumped on Hester's bandwagon, to be honest. Indeed, I think it was a collective sharing of experience that was really valuable, because it was quite informally done over cups of tea in ways that I really wouldn't have expected the usual white middle class folks to do. And it was really nice to see after years of no one talking about those issues. Yeah, everyone just straight up compared all their deals. That's the first step in it.
That's really great. Yeah. That has come up quite a lot, hasn't it? Like the feeling of isolation versus like needing to actually be able to compare in order to like set standards. And that came up a few times in our group. Helga brought that up. So finding more vehicles for doing that, whether it's through the LWA or not. But I also found it important. I think it's important that we can obviously access so much support through the LWA, and Catherine has so much experience in this, but also what came up in our group is the need for this to be, like, I know that you've already said autonomous, it could be autonomously organized, but for it to be a group of people that isn't just in connection with the LWA, because the autonomy is needed in part just to prevent blacklisting from certain employers, which could happen. Well, that's what was brought up. I don't know if anyone from that group wants to say more about that, but also, as you've already brought up, Catherine, and other people, so many people have brought up, there are unions that can support precarious workers that have a lot of experience with that, where the LWA doesn't, although it has experience and funding to do a lot of other things. So all of these things are still possibilities. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, nothing's been shut down by us also accessing support, or by an employee autonomous group being set up in the LWA. Like, it may be that a separate group, a union, forms in another way, and we have representatives in that employee group, for example. But the more connection, the better, is also what I'm hearing. Cool. Does anyone else want to? We have about 10 minutes left.
I wonder, there's obviously people in this room right now who are super into workers' rights and unionization and believe in the power of collective action on the part of workers. But I wonder if there's like, there's been decades of concerted action by governments to discredit unions and workers' action. I wonder if there's some value in just like having a place where we can where people can share about like success stories around unions, and like, unionization works and it helps and it can like have these positive outcomes, and we can do that too, sort of thing, to sort of counter that narrative. And I thought also like that sort of thing could be useful, as well as something was mentioned around scale and how so many of these farms are so small, and there's such a mindset in the sector often about like smaller being better, but sometimes smaller scale things prevent, it's harder to get, like, as Catherine, I think you were saying, like it's harder for these tiny farms to get the sort of scales necessary to pay people well. And so I wonder if there's also like, I don't know concretely what this looks like, but some sort of like conversation about like, well, scale isn't inherently good or bad no matter what scale it is, and maybe it's worth talking about like the flaws with a sort of focus on only small scale things, and how that might be a barrier to building worker power.
Yeah. That's a great point. And also, it is amazing how different similarly scaled organizations manage to pay people. I keep saying, we're just repeating things that Sharon just said to me, but Sharon just told me that you worked for an organization on 2 acres that could pay 6 full-time members of staff, or something wild and amazing like that. And so, and you're totally right that in the same vein, like, a much bigger, like, you know, a comparatively small scale farm, like of 6 or 10 acres, might only be able to pay 2 full-time staff and have unpaid trainees. So, you know, like both happen, and it is about scale, but it's also about business models. I really believe that, because I literally know exactly the profit my boss makes, and he could factor in a few sick days legally, he should, and he doesn't, but he does have a profit margin. And yeah, no one's holding him to account for that. Yeah, and also, darn it, I just made my whole screen too big to see any of my notes. Oh, it's fine. The collective action positive stories idea, I think that's a really wonderful idea. And I don't think that's something that has to be limited to land workers who want to unionize to organize. I think that if that's something that you're interested in, Olivia, I think that it would be an incredible thing to get behind. And I think you'd have a lot of support in organizing that, probably from the LWA, who actually has a really fab film club, for example, where I've seen really excellent films about unionizing, such as like in America with tomato farmers, and the action that they were able to take, like, couldn't just target the farmers, which were huge scale, to pay them better. They targeted consumers, you know? So like the creativity like behind that, but like all of those kind of stories could be really focused on, and it would be great to get more support for that. So yeah, if anyone's interested in doing something like that, I think get in touch, maybe with me or Catherine, or both, or do it yourself, or, you know, like that would be so cool to see. Yeah, great idea. Oh, I'll put my email in. I'm not very fast to respond, but I always do respond in the chat. If anyone wants to take this down, just, yeah, email me any ideas, or if you ever want to chat about this stuff.
So
reliably slow.
So we're just coming up to about 5 minutes before we have to close the session. So I was just wondering if anyone's got any final points they wanted to raise just now. Now would be the time to do them.
I have one. I think we mentioned it earlier about volunteering. Obviously, a lot of people quite suspicious of volunteering in terms of it being like, you know, it can be exploitation, but I think a lot of people might say that they've had some really fantastic experiences volunteering. And is there a space or a future for, you know, formal volunteering in terms of offering people training, just as a lot of organizations can't afford to pay people? That is a problem in itself, but it's kind of a long-term solution to paying everyone for their work. But in the meantime, what have people done to kind of improve volunteer experience and sort of offer people some rights and voice and training?
I think that's a good point, and it always will come up within this sector as something to like look at, to differentiate, and to like treat positively in its own right. Like you said, like to promote it as an experience that should be in and of itself like good. And can I just point to one thing on that? Do you know about Workaway? Yeah, Workaway made some recent really interesting policy changes where if you contribute to a business, you should be paid minimum wage of the country you're doing that in, whether or not you're being provided with food and accommodation. If that was a standard that was followed by organic farms in the UK, that would be a literally massive change. That would literally change so much. Whereas if you're not contributing to business outcomes, you can safely say that your experience will be different. It won't be subject to the same sort of pressure. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about because it does overlap with our sector. And yeah, I think that'd be a really interesting thing to think more about. I think there is some work being done there, but it would be great to talk more about that as well, because yeah, I think that's a really important issue and it always comes up.
Just before we close, I just wanted to confirm that the next proposed date for a meeting on this is Wednesday, the 26th of January, and at 6 to 7 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great.
And I've taken the emails of everyone who's posted in the chat so far. So if you haven't yet, or you don't want to in the chat, just email me and I'll email you a Zoom link and you can share that with anyone else. It will just be next steps. And it's not like any of us who've so far led on this have to keep leading at all. Okay. So yeah, come with ideas and also like come with like suggestions. Oh, I've just read a note.
Ooh.
Is there maybe like a draft agenda or something that we could like contribute to for the next meeting? Or
that's a great idea. Why don't we'll start forming that and I'll send that round with the Zoom link for people to start making. That's a great shout. Thank you.
Okay. So I think the chat from this is going to be saved, so we'll have everyone's email addresses, and so long as they've been posted in there, and as Zoe sends around the agenda, that'd be great. Oh, cool. Well, thanks very much, everyone. That was great. It was really great meeting you all, and I feel like I've learned a lot. So.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Zoe.
And thank you so much, Zoe, for all the work you're doing on this. This is really amazing work, and anything I can do to support it.
That's so sweet. To be honest, like it's not that many things. It's like literally this is the most productive thing I've been to on it. So none of this works without other people being
that's the thing.
doing anything. So thank you for showing up and participating. Seriously, everyone. Like, you know, it could have just been me and Catherine chatting about how great a union would be one day.
We'll make it one day. All right. Solidarity, everyone. We'll see you around. Goodbye.
Bye.